revealed the Vietnam My Lai massacre in 1969. He exposed the Abu Ghraib scandal in 2004. He has been an inspiration for investigative reporters from around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our colleague, Mr. Seymour Hersh.
What is wrong with you? It's 9 o'clock in the morning. It's the middle of the night for journalists. Why are you here? Why am I here? Anyway, look, it's my firm belief that we could, in the United States anyway, we could lose 70% of the top editors of all the networks and all the televisions and newspapers, and we'd be better off. Because the people who get promoted in newspapers and networks are the most cautious ones. And we spend weekends in hotel rooms by ourselves, traveling on a story and trying constantly to get people that don't want to talk to us. And also, we have the moral dilemma of interviewing somebody, and what we probably should say in a perfect world is, sir or madame, the next 2 hours will be very detrimental to you. We should put them on notice, but we don't do that. Instead, we do what we do. After it was over, they heard a noise. This is all, I'm just telling you what happened. They heard a noise, and some mother at the bottom of the ditch had put a boy about 2 years old under her stomach, and somehow the bullets had not penetrated. They had repeatedly fired so nobody would survive. And they heard a keening noise, and it was the noise of a child crying and screaming as he crawled his way through the bodies and got to the top full of other people's blood and began to run in fear. 2, maybe perhaps 3. And the man officer in charge, the infamous, his name was Lieutenant Calley, but there were 5 other first lieutenants there too and second lieutenants. Calley turned to Paul Meadlow, this farm boy from a small farm in southern Indiana, very rural part of America, very poor. And he said, plug him. And Meadlow, who had been shooting most sort of like an automat, when others stopped, somehow this he could not do, and he just said, no, I couldn't do it. One was enough. So in this great moment of braggadocio, Cali officers had a weapon called a carbine, a smaller rifle, ran behind the kid and shot him in the back of the head as he was running away. It was a memory completely repressed. I get into the story a year and a half later, and I'm running around and talking to people. And I start writing, I find Cali, and I do the story. I'm freelancing. I can't sell it to anybody. Nobody wanted the story. We had to make a news agency. We invented a news agency and then removed the newspapers from responsibility by saying, we in the news agency are selling you a story at the fixed price of $100 each. And we sold it to the New York Times for the same price as to a small paper in Montana. But we got it out. And to the credit of the newspapers, they ran it. And it became a great issue. And then this woman, this uneducated, rural American woman, said to me, quote unquote, she said, I gave them a good boy, and they sent me back a murderer. And that's what it's about. You have a moment like that. Like, look, I've had other moments, but that's one you remember. And that's what we're in the business for.
Cut 2 years later in Abu Ghraib. How much more difficult was it to do Abu Ghraib compared to My Lai?
Actually, it turns out in Abu Ghraib you're dealing again with young soldiers that were from a rural part of America that were in an Army Reserve unit. The young woman you saw with thumbs up and thumbs down, if you remember, forcing the Iraqi prisoners to simulate masturbation and homosexual activity. Those photographs, the woman in the photographs were rural women, basically had probably gotten through high school, had joined the Army Reserve to make an extra 150, go to a meeting once a month and go to active duty 2 weeks a year, maybe $150 extra a month to get to get a pizza or to get a hairdressing. They were very. I was dealing with people when I did that story who didn't know who I was. It's not about fame. It's about work. It's there at the fingertips. So we should all be better journalists because not only the search engines and the ability to get everything. We're a much smarter group of journalists
than we were 20 years ago because we have so much more information at our disposal. So the reason I'm optimistic is it's going to get there. We're going to figure out a model for the internet that's going to work, that's going to make investigative reporting not only possible, it's going to take out the middlemen who are, I think, very destructive. One of the great moral failures of our press in the last 10 years was the inability of the American press to tell what we should have about the Bush and Iraq and the intelligence about Iraq. It was a story to be gotten, and we joined the team collectively, and we didn't want, there was active discouragement of those reporters. And by the way, there's tremendous reporters at the New York Times, Washington Post, who knew there were problems and they couldn't get them in. A two-star major general retires, and he's not 3, and you get him afterwards, and he's got something to tell you. Once they retire, they're very interesting. 4 stars, the commanders, when they retire, they're suddenly confronted with boredom, and they still have people that they mentored who have replaced them, and so people still talk to them. I've had amazingly good luck with retired senior officers. It's complicated to have such a big story so early because you're always being measured by that. And in one field, one incident, there were a bunch of people running around in the field and they opened fire. And it was a soccer game. And they dragged them in. And you could see from the photographs, they were only from the waist down, that they started, in the end, they dragged the bodies together and they passed out APCs. They passed out weapons, rather. They passed out anti-tank weapons and dropped them among them and declared it that they'd shot a bunch of insurgents. And it was, became reported as a victory. Sort of like the same thing happened in My Lai. And so what is the obligation of a journalist then? To write about it makes them all murderers. It's so complicated. The world's more frightening now than it was under Bush and Cheney in their last year or two because everybody knew exactly what's going on. Now there's a different game plan. And I just don't know, I honestly don't know. I know people at the JCS level. I know people who deal in the NSC. I don't have access like I did to the Vice President's office. But I don't know what Obama is about. I don't know whether, I don't know who advises him. I know that the National Security Advisor, General Jones, my friends describe him this way: I'm General Jones and you're not, which doesn't sound good to me. And I know people in the National Security Council are frustrated. Let's put it this way. The international peril is certainly as high as it was in the worst of Bush and Cheney. Objectivity means we can't ever discuss something that might be tough on America. But I'll tell you, the Iranian message to us is, excuse me, the Cold War is over. Will you explain to us why you're in the Gulf? That's what their message is to us. And I'm telling you, you have a lot of family-owned states that are in real panic.